So once I became aware that I drifted right, on top of that, I would typically come to a tree and walk around to the right, or if I came to a pond, I would go to the right, just because I'm right side dominant, you know. Once that awareness was created, then I was like, oh, well, every other obstacle that I come to, I need to make sure I'm going left. And also, if I'm going to walk, I probably shouldn't walk a mile and trust that I'm going to be on the same line, because I'm going to drift. Instead, I'm going to walk like 100 meters and just reshoot my azimuth to make sure. And I might have to make a tiny adjustment, because at one point in time, I remember before I went through this training, I was like a quarter of a mile from where I was supposed to be. It was terrible. And so after this training, it was like, oh, instead of just this one long sprint, let's make it a marathon built of smaller steps, small measurements.
And then you're getting those little wins along the way.
And you are.
Oh, I'm still on.
And also, if I did have to make a course correction, if I did get off track a little bit.
It wasn't a quarter mile.
It's not. It was like the littlest, like, turn left like half an inch. And now walk another 100 meters. So that's the mentality. And you can do that for building wealth.
Welcome back, everyone. Episode 12.
Number 12. Let's get into it. All right, I got a question for you.
All right.
Let's assume that I have a very limited understanding of finances. I look up to you for guidance and advice. I trust you as a person and as a friend. And I just come to you and I say, hey, Josh, I'm considering taking on some debt.
Okay.
What in your financial side of your brain, right? The training that you have, the experiences that you have, what wills just start, not what you say back to me right away, but what are some of the initial things that start to come front of mind, top of mind?
So usually the first thing I think about is, all right, you're making a decision to bring on debt, to take on debt. Is it a need or is it a want? And if you can define that, does it help you reach your financial goals long term, or does it keep you from reaching those goals?
Can you give me an example of a need versus a want in terms of?
Well, I'd say, so we talked about earlier, if you're getting a $75,000 car and you're having to take a loan out for it, do you need that $75,000 car to go to work? Or can you go get a $15,000 or $20,000 car, take out a much smaller debt to get to work and back?
Yeah. So, because I think when we talk about debt, we see some real life things in our job, right? Like there are times when clients come to us and there's medical procedures that are unplanned that they need to, get their kids through. Sometimes we work with clients that have almost no extra cash flow. Like they are living paycheck to paycheck. They make minimum wage. They have multiple kids. Inflation's been tough. We see both sides. So we work with some very well-to-do clients. We work with some very wealthy families. But on the flip side, we also work with people that aren't.
Right.
And so sometimes even the simplest thing, like, my tires need replaced.
Yep.
And they don't have the $600 to $800 it takes to replace tires, but otherwise would have to drive around on a very unsafe vehicle. So needs and wants can look very different for different people.
Yep.
And as we start talking through debt in general, it's really, really just important to realize how individualized this financial vital sign is for every person. A conversation with two of the same, or the same conversation for two different people could have two different outcomes.
Right.
So I think that's just really, really important. Any other thoughts on again, what wheels are spinning when you hear somebody?
Yeah, I'm really just thinking, is the debt necessary or is it unnecessary? Is it helping you reach your goal or is it taking you away from it? That's the first two things before I even have a conversation with somebody. And those are really going to be the first questions I ask them. You know, what's the reason behind it?
You touched on goals. For me, the first question that I'm probably going to ask is, does this fall under the umbrella of your financial purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Are we doing something that gets us closer to that desired end state that you have created for yourself? Because like everything that we do, so much of what we do, like when I say financial statement of purpose or financial purpose, it could be your financial why. It doesn't really differentiate from your like why in life, right? It doesn't really differentiate from your purpose in life, your values. It's just
lots of overflows or
it's how your finances align with your like life, mm-hmm. right? And so for that, one of the first things that I'm going to ask is again, what's changed, or is it the same about your financial purpose? And if it is the same, does it fall under the umbrella of, hey, this helps me get closer to my end state, my objective, those goals that I've created? If it doesn't fall under that umbrella, we really have to understand why we need this or why we would consider taking on debt. Because it's probably going to derail us. It's probably going to take us away from accomplishing those things that really, really matter to us in the time that we plan to accomplish them. So that's probably my first consideration. The money nerd in me will start immediately jumping to those cash flow things. Like, all right, if you take out this debt, you're going to have this new debt payment. If you don't have a lot of free cash flow already,
where's it coming from?
Where is it coming from? Mm-hmm. It's probably going to have to come from, like, if you were saving about 15% of your income and this new debt payment's going to be 5% of your income,
right?
You're probably going to have to give up about 5% of your savings. What does that do?
Yeah, what are the repercussions
to the long term
of that? Yeah.
Now, mind you, none of this is what we're saying to the client right away, right? We're not bombarding a client with this. If they come, we're going to have a full on conversation. These are just those internal wills that I'm automatically starting to consider when we start talking about debt, or when a client asks me, should I, or I'm not even should I, just I'm considering debt. What's your take? What's your advice? What's your feedback there? So that's kind of just to get the wheels spinning. We're talking about debt. August is debt month.
Mm-hmm. The last show we talked about, when you're buying a house, what's a good percentage? Talked about the 28-36.
Yep, the 28% for the pity payment and 36% for the total
debt to income,
debt payment, mm-hmm. debt servicing payment. So again, if I'm making $10,000 a month, $3,600 a month should be the total of all my debt payments. That's school loans, car note, mortgage.
Yep.
It's just everything. And 28% should be what, like $2,800 a month should be no more than what my mortgage is. So those are some recaps from the last call, but we want to start looking at the education piece. So people that we work with, we have some really, really financially intelligent clients. Mm-hmm. Some of them know things, like have really taught me things at certain points in my career. Like I have some really intelligent clients. On the other hand, we have some clients that just have no idea the simple things like that most people might assume are common knowledge.
Right.
They just haven't grasped it yet, and that's fine. Like that's what we're here for, mm-hmm. and that's what this podcast is for, is to educate and kind of raise the education across like everyone in our community. So if you're listening to this, you might know some of what we're about to talk about. If anything, it's a good refresher, or if nothing, it's a good refresher. But for some of you guys, this would be a great place to take a few notes.
So we're going to try to make this pretty simple as far as explaining terms. But really what we probably need to understand in the beginning is like, what are certain types of debt? Like when you're going to get student loan debts, or you're going to get, a loan for a car, like what are the different types of debts? And that's kind of what you're going to go into.
Yeah. And before we jump into that though, I want to, let's just clear the air on a few things, just so much of what we go through in life, how we're raised, circumstances we've been through, it tweaks our psyche sometimes to where we have relationships with things and we don't really understand those relationships. We might feel guilty for, eating ice cream too late at night. And it's just because we were raised, and every time we tried to sneak ice cream at night before bed, mom would get angry, the notion that sometimes just these feelings and emotions get kind of put inside of us. We're not really sure where they're from. Sometimes we don't even realize we're there until it's brought out. But I want to talk about the words good and bad, healthy and unhealthy, and necessary and unnecessary when it comes to debt. So first and foremost, we're trying to remove the words good and bad.
Yeah. You hear that a lot. Like, what's good debt? What's bad debt?
Yeah. We're not going to necessarily talk about that. With that said, we're not saying there's no such thing as bad debt, and we're not saying there's no such thing as good debt. What we're saying is, I don't like those words.
Right.
Because
there's a
sometimes,
better way to describe it.
Sometimes what would be quote unquote a bad debt is necessary.
Right.
Right. And then it just kind of implies this guilt. Like, I was in this position that I had to take, and now I'm feeling guilty about myself.
Right.
I don't want that.
Yep.
I would rather say this was a necessary debt that made me healthy enough to continue in this trajectory.
Right.
Right.
To reach your goals.
So we're going to try to use those words, and same thing, like sometimes people say, oh, it's a really good debt. Well, maybe it is a good debt, but at the same time, we don't want you trying to think that, oh, I should go take debt on just because I was about to say
it could be considered good debt, but you might be overextending yourself.
You can. There's a lot of implications.
Cash flows,
So we really want to just, when we're having this conversation, understand we're going to use words like healthy, unhealthy. We're going to talk like if you're talking with us one-on-one, or you're like throughout more conversations, you might hear words like necessary. If we say words like good or bad, we're probably going to correct yourself very quick, because we're trying very hard.
We got to get out of that too, because we've been using that.
Yeah, I just don't want people, like, again, we're all in different situations. We're all come from different places in life. We've all been taught and mentored by differing people with different viewpoints on debt. I just don't want people getting inside of their own head to feel like they're less than somebody else because they were in a situation where they had to make a decision.
Yep.
So we're just going to say that was a necessary decision. And if we do come to the point where, hey, we took on unnecessary debt, or it wasn't a healthy decision, or it was unhealthy for us to take on this debt, then we're just going to create a sprint to get back on track. Right? That's it. We're just going to correct that past mistake,
get
back on track,
correct it,
and we're going to work forward from there. So now that we've kind of level set that, and we've kind of taken away any kind of guilt in this conversation, or we've taken away this notion that there's good or bad here. It's money, and it's a tool, and that's what we're going to talk about. So let's educate now with some common terms associated with debt. So first of all, what is debt? Just quite simply, we owe somebody something. Mm-hmm. In terms of what we're talking about, financial debt is where we owe somebody money. They've lent us money, and we have to pay that back. There's different types of debt that we can create with someone. So common words you might hear, secured debt, or unsecured debt. Let's just differentiate those two things first. So again, we're going to give you about 5 financial terms that we want you to walk away with just understanding a little bit more about. Many people already know what this is, but just in case we don't, let's talk about what is a secured debt. With the word secured debt, there's going to be another term that you need to know, and that is a lien. Okay. So in this case, a secured debt, basically the most common one to think about would be like a car loan. Mm-hmm. In this case, I go purchase a vehicle, I get a loan set up, and the lender gives me a loan because he or she knows I'm buying a car, and that car becomes kind of collateral.
Yep.
Or essentially, if I end up defaulting or not paying back my loan,
it's the lender's security.
The lender can come and take my car, and probably what they're going to do is auction off that car and take the money from that auction and pay off my loan.
Right.
In that sense, the lien is an agreement that I own the car, but that lender has the right to take it if I default on my loan. Okay. And in the other word that I use, collateral, that's the vehicle in this case. It's the piece of property that is offsetting the risk, right? So in this case, the lender is the one who has the risk, right? The lender's loaning me money, and they're not sure if I'm going to repay it or not.
Right.
They think I am. They hope I am, but they're not sure. So the risk is on the lender. So because the risk is on the lender, he can charge me interest. He can charge me for the risk, and he can put a lien on a piece of collateral that if I don't pay my loan, he can come back and take that asset. In this case, again, most commonly a car note, right? Same thing for a house, though. Mortgages, the mortgage lender can come and take your house from you if you stop paying your mortgage, right? The flip side, the opposite of a secure loan is an unsecured loan. And if I have an unsecured loan, this would be something more along the lines of just like a personal loan.
Yep, personal loan from the bank.
And now there's more risk because there's no collateral. There's nothing to put a lien on because there's no asset tied to this type of loan.
Right.
So they are basically making the decision to just trust and take my word that I'm going to repay them.
Yep.
Generally, it's one of the most risky loans.
Yep.
And because of that, the interest rate will be significantly higher, right? If I might be able to, if I have good credit and good,
it'll be a little bit lower.
Maybe I have a 5% car loan, but I have a 12% line, like a personal loan, right? So that's kind of again, we just talked about the word secure, and that's just when an asset is tied to the loan. If I fail to pay, the lender will take that asset away from me. Inside of that, we talked about a lien, which is basically just kind of an agreement that they can take that asset. And then the collateral would be the asset itself. That's kind of there to be taken. And then we talked about the unsecured loan, right? The unsecured loan is that loan that, doesn't have any collateral. There's no lien on it. There's nothing except my word and my track record.
Right.
And because of the higher risk, typically higher rates are charged for the borrower.
And one of the most probably typical types of debt that most people know about is what? Revolving
debt.
Credit cards.
Yeah. So the word revolving debt, typically basically what you're looking at here is an agreement between you and a lender that you can borrow up to a certain amount, right? Like a limit. So maybe I'm applying for a credit card, and that credit card has a $25,000 credit limit. Then I can choose when to use it, how to use it, and I can also choose how long that I should maintain that balance, right? So I could go charge $2,000 and pay it off a week later, or I could go charge $2,000 to it and pay off $100 over the next 20 months.
Right.
Or I could run it up to $25,000 and maintain payments. And so it's revolving in the sense that you can come and go kind of in and out of this debt, but the limit is always there.
Right.
Yeah. The car payment has that fixed.
Typically it's fixed.
Fixed
you can
amount.
Always pay more, but typically it's fixed amount.
This is also true for lines of credit. So like your HELOCs,
you'll have a 36 month or a 60 month time frame.
So those are typically more considered like revolving credit as well. So those are some of the key terms that we're looking at there. Again, secure versus unsecure. That idea of having a lien and having collateral, and then also your revolving debt. So those are some of just the terms that a lot of people, when they hear debt, they may not know to differentiate those things. There's pros and cons with all kinds of pieces. A lot of people, revolving debt is probably a most unfavorable debt. Usually it's very high when it comes to interest rates, like credit cards and things like that. But a lot of people have great financial discipline where they'll say, hey, my monthly spending, I'm spending about $4,000 a month. I'm going to put all my expenses on this credit card. I'm going to rack up some great points, and I'm going to pay off my credit card at the end of every month so I don't pay those interest rate charges. In that sense, that revolving credit can be used to your advantage. It's just oftentimes that is the most devastating type of credit that we can get and let get out of hand, where people then find themselves upside down and having to pay payments that they can't really make. It can get bad pretty quick. So that's, with every single thing, if you're considering debt, it's very important to do due diligence, and say, hey, like, not only what debt should I take out, but should I take out debt or not, but what type of debt.
Right.
We've dealt with strategies where people needed cash, and we've done everything from helps with, HELOCs to cash out refis to
security-based lines of credit.
So there's a lot of different options for people. It's not always necessary for you just to take the first thing that comes top of mind. It's important to, I think, talk to people to get the best fit for you. So
a lot of people I've talked to, they've never heard of a securities-based line of credit. They're not familiar with margin loans, and those could be an option instead of going and paying a bank this super high interest rate for a personal loan.
And another funny thing too is a lot of people, they associate like risk tolerance with investments. But I really do think that there's a lot of there should be a lot of risk tolerance conversations with people taking on debt as well, even types of debt, right? So, and we're actually working with a client now who's considering some investment options that he could potentially create debt, or he could pay cash, and we're working through some analysis there with them. But the reality is kind of, even despite the analysis on what makes most number sense, is the fact that I think we already know what one might be most risk appropriate for him, right?
Correct.
So even understanding your risk appetite could help you determine the best way forward for taking on debt, and the amount of debt, and when, and all those considerations. So just some things to think about there.
And that's a question that should be asked more to people, that I don't feel like is asked.
Yeah. I mean, even
about risk tolerance with debt.
Yeah. I listen to a lot of financial podcasts, and like when I'm listening to them, there's always these good ideas, given to people that, yes, they are a good idea.
Right.
I think the thought that I always have is it appropriate? Right. And I think that some people are very risk adverse. And it's really, really important. Two things there. One, we like to encourage people, of course, to work with us when it's appropriate. And oftentimes I say to other people, it's always good to have somebody thinking like you, but also from a different point of view, having that empathy, but also understanding a lot about you to make the decision absent of emotions that's a best fit. having that kind of team approach to making appropriate decisions for you is invaluable, right? It's a priceless thing that you have when you work with somebody.
Well, it helps you go into a decision a lot more confident than you would otherwise.
Yeah, because the other option, and this is achievable, you can be kind of so self-aware that you already know like the psychology of your own thinking, so you can kind of get outside your own head to help to make a decision. But that's incredibly challenging.
Yeah,
it's incredibly challenging, and
do
even people that are very, very good can get sucked into their own kind of psyche and end up making an emotional decision when they should not necessarily be making an emotional decision.
They get tunnel vision.
Exactly. And so not to say that people can't do it, though. I just think I bring that up to say, if you're going to go into a decision, like if you're coming to a decision point of debt, no debt, but how do I take on this debt? What's appropriate for me? I think you just have to be very aware of the emotions tied with those decisions and say, okay, this is where my first instinct is to go. But I also know this about me, and I know I'm making this consideration because of how I was raised or this interaction I had with, A, B, and C person. So those are all things to think about.
It's always good to explore other options.
We talked about some key terms inside of debt. One of the things that we want to make sure we cover on this episode as well is ways to attack debt. Mm-hmm. So
we talked about how to take it on.
Yeah, we've done so here's the thing is we're having this podcast about debt, and people are like, man, I wish I would have heard this 3 years ago.
Right.
But I'm kind of in a bad place. Right. I'm listening to this because I Googled something about debt and your podcast came up. I'm already here. I've already found myself in an unhealthy situation. Right. I've already realized that I have a pattern or behavior of taking on unnecessary debts.
Now, how do I get out of it?
I'm tired of it. I want to change. How do I fix it? When I think of, like we were talking about this and kind of prepping for the show, and in my brain, I like the word like attack, like full on assault came top of mind, and Josh found some more adequate ways to approach this. So I appreciate your homework. He'll get to that in a second. But I think that one thing I reverted back to was, I used to compete, do like MMA and jiu-jitsu and things like that. And I had a great wrestling coach and jiu-jitsu coach. And one of the things, like, he was very firm in the approach of always being like a finesse fighter, precision, controlled aggression. It was all about using mechanics and technique. It should, maybe less than 10% of the time, we should be using just raw strength. Most of the time, if you're trying to use raw strength and it's not working, it's because your technique isn't right. So fix the technique, right?
So what about the finesse and being controlled? Would you compare that to like maybe paying the minimum payments?
Well, no, I think
things or.
Well, I think the point is there are times, right, when my wrestling coach or one of the same guy, when he would say, now's the time to just go 100% like raw strength, like don't let up. He was like, think of like the bull that has the cowboy on his back. Like you are just going to buck and use every muscle you have until that guy is like, basically when you're on your back, when somebody is mounted on top of you in a fight and you're on your back, just fix it. Like do everything you can, 100% strength, raw emotion, go. Yep. Right. When I think of being upside down in debt, and when I think of being on my back financially because of debt, it's time for that to be my focus and really not much else. That needs to be my sprint, my 100% effort into getting myself off of my back financially. There's not a lot of finesse there. There's not a lot of technique there. And that's where I think you came in with two great examples of technique type approaches to reducing
Right.
debt and getting off your back. So
There's
why don't you
just a
go
couple
through
of
those?
couple of ideas. One that has been used more often than the other is the snowball effect. So basically, if you've got 4 credit cards, you line them up lowest to highest. Doesn't matter what the interest rate is, and you want to pay off that lowest one. Whatever that payment was that you're using to pay off the lowest one, you take that and put it into the next one, and you snowball it. And the whole purpose of that is to get the short wins quickly.
Okay, so just to clarify, I have 3 credit card payments. One is 3 credit cards.
Yep.
One has a balance of $200. One has a balance of $500, and one has a balance of $1,000.
So the first credit card,
All of my credit card payments have minimum payments every month. So
Correct.
one is, that first one I got to pay $10 a month on, the other one I got to pay $20 a month on, and the third one I got to pay $50 a month on.
Yep. So you want to pay the minimum on the latter ones, and you want to pay as much as you can on that first one.
Okay.
And then you're just paying the minimums on the other.
So once that $200 one is paid off,
Whatever you were paying to get that off,
I was
take
paying
that
$100
money
a month
and put it to the next one. So now you're paying $120.
because of the minimum.
Yeah,
Okay.
for the next one, you get that paid off. Now you're paying $150 because you're adding that $30 minimum from the last one.
Yep.
Now you're paying $150 on
Plus
the last
minimum.
one.
Yeah.
So that's the snowball effect.
Okay. And again, you mentioned that the reason somebody might want to do that is because you're getting these tiny wins along the way.
Correct.
Right? Like you're building momentum.
Yep.
So if you're a person that likes to measure progress,
You get to see those $0 balances.
It happens
It makes
quicker.
you feel very good to see those $0 balances.
Okay.
And then the other way of doing it is called the avalanche. So basically what you're doing is you're going to line up your highest interest rate cards.
Gotcha.
And it's the same concept. You're going to pay the minimums on the others as much as you can on that high interest rate credit card.
Gotcha.
Until you get it paid off, and then you roll down the line. That is going to save you more money over time because you're not paying as much interest. You're paying more of the principal balance down. And that is for, we talk about the psychology of everything. You have to be very mentally tough and strong to go through that because it's a longer process.
Yeah. Because on the flip side, like in the first one and the example that I gave, if I'm paying $100 a month, I'm paying off that first $200 credit card balance in
really
2 months.
quick. Yeah.
Win. Right. Yep. Now it motivates me to keep going. Yep. Whereas let's say the highest interest rate credit card I have is that 2001.
Yep.
Now I'm only paying $100 a month. So it's going to take me 20 months to pay off that high interest rate. I've saved more money in the long run because I got rid of that high interest rate first.
Right.
But man, like 20 months of not seeing that credit card bill go away could kind of make me
psychologically is a lot tougher.
Yeah. I mean, it could feel like I'm not making progress. So I think it's important that again, this would be kind of, if like I can think of 2 very different clients that I have right now where I'm like, this would be the perfect fit for this one. And the other one would be the right. I think the avalanche is probably my favorite one from strictly a financial
Correct.
planning, decision-making kind of thing.
Yeah. But I'm like, I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's got more to do with the psychology of it. Do you need the wins to keep you on track, to keep you motivated?
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I think
that's huge.
Again, it comes back to healthy or unhealthy. What's going to keep me on track to getting off my back?
Right.
So that way I can be on my feet and financially ahead far enough that I can start making progress towards those goals and that purpose that I have in life.
Right.
And really start getting, the process of aligning your money with the heart of things that matter to you the most. It's not necessarily when I can finally fund an account for, giving to this cause that it could start as far back as me making the right decisions to pay down my debt so that one day I can fund this account that will ultimately give to the process is a very, very long process. And so I'm frequently telling people, like, one of my jobs is to align your money with your heart. And that process, you may not see, you may think, well, how in the heck is paying this bill,
have anything
aligning
to do with this.
my values and who I am as a human being. And it's just like, hey, look, like, trust the process. Here's what we're doing. We're creating this freedom here. Mm-hmm. And in order to have this freedom here, we have to get through, paying down this debt.
Right.
And then once we do that, then we have to build this account. We have to build an emergency savings, or we have to build, this funding account, or whatever the case may be, because then once it's funded there, then we can be on our way to giving to who we need to give to, or, passing on that legacy gift to our kids or grandkids.
Yep.
So the process is it's a marathon, right? We talk about sprints all the time. We are not sprinting the entire marathon. We're creating small sprints to keep us on track. When I was in the Army, we would do a lot of this training. It was land navigation. Basically, I was given a map, a compass, and a protractor, and told to go, out into the middle of nowhere, and I'd have to find my way to certain places. Mm-hmm. And if I realized, hey, I just have to walk a mile at 60 degrees, whatever, that might be, what is that, northeast, something like that. I don't really know.
That's you, not me.
It's been a long time. But if I have to walk a certain direction down to, on that compass, like, if I have to walk a mile,
right, there's
this thing that we all have that's called drift. Like, everybody has drift. So if I just look, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to walk 100 yards that way, and then I get blindfolded and just try to walk a straight line.
Yeah,
I'm going to drift left or right. It's just in our body. It's how we walk. It's how we move. I am a person that drifts to my right. On top of that, I also am right-handed. So one thing that I observed when I was walking through the woods is every time I would come to a tree that was on my direction, I would walk around to the right. I'd move to the right of the tree. So once I became aware that I drifted right, on top of that, I would typically come to a tree and walk around to the right, or if I came to a pond, I would go to the right, just because I'm right side dominant. You know, once that awareness was created, then I was like, oh, well, every other obstacle that I come to, I need to make sure I'm going left. And also, if I'm going to walk, I probably shouldn't walk a mile and trust that I'm going to be on the same line, because I'm going to drift.
Right.
Instead, I'm going to walk like 100 meters and just reshoot my azimuth to make sure. And I might have to make a tiny adjustment, because at one point in time, I remember before I went through this training, I was like a quarter of a mile from where I was supposed to be.
Right.
It was terrible. And so after this training, it was like, oh, instead of just this one long sprint, let's make it a marathon built of smaller steps, small measurements.
And then you're getting those little wins along the way.
And you are.
Oh, I'm still on.
And also, if I did have to make a course correction, if I did get off track a little bit.
It wasn't a quarter mile.
It's not. It was like the littlest, like, turn left like half an inch.
Right.
And now walk another 100 meters. Yeah. So that's the mentality. And you can do that for building wealth. That is 100% the same mindset, but also, like, part of wealth building typically can, for many people, start by debt reduction, right? If you think about a net worth statement, which every one of our clients has access to on their phones, which is incredibly important to us.
Yep.
And you should know your net worth, and you should be able to visualize your net worth statement. It's assets and it's debts. And sometimes just reducing our debts can raise our net worth, and that's all it takes. So that's really important. That's about all I got for this episode. You got anything else there?
I can't think of anything else right now.
No final thoughts. Guys, we're going to keep, moving forward through this debt month. We got our private content calls coming up. If you guys want to get involved in that, just shoot us an email. Next podcast will be answering questions from clients. So if you do, or listeners, so if you do, go to our website. Our email's on our website. You can shoot us an email with your debt related question, and we'll
try to get to it.
Try to get to all of those. And if you want to explore more about monitoring your financial vital signs, also reach out. We're getting some incredible feedback, having incredible conversations, and the education is just like the knowledge base of the people that we're working with is just skyrocketing. It is really, really an incredible thing. So we look forward to hearing more from you, and hope you look forward to hearing more from us. We'll talk to you soon.
We hope you learned from our conversation today. It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes and not intended to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you and you have questions of how it might be applicable to your specific situation, please reach out to your financial professional. Of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you regarding specific questions or applications to your individual financial situation. With that, here are a few disclosures. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investments. Your results may vary. With that, thank you, and we look forward to having you back. Take care.